We're good. Good afternoon, everyone, or good morning, where some of you are. I'd like to welcome you to our program today, Judeans in the U.S. Military. My name is Maida Wasserman. I was a CYJ alumnus, I was a camper, I was a counselor, I was a Mayor Kezet, and I just wanted to thank you all for being here for what I know is going to be a wonderful program. I would like to introduce Barbara Bauman. She will be our moderator for this panel, and I will hand it over to her. But thank you all for being here today.
Thank you, Maida. I'm thrilled to be here today, and I just keep looking around. I love to see the Lexington and Pittsburgh representation, my two hometowns now. I have so many connections to CYJ Midwest and to the three alumni that are presenting today. I was a Chanicha, Madricha, Mayor Kezet, Rotc specialist at camp. I'm now a proud mom of 3 CYJ alumni, one of whom is going to be working at camp this summer. I'm very excited for him. And I'm proud to have served on the board of CYJ for the past 4 years. This summer, in fact, I'm taking the reins from Brian Jaffe, and I'm going to be the CYJ Midwest Board President, and I'm really looking forward to that. Since CYJ is one big family, it's kind of no surprise that I'm also connected as a camper of or counselor to all of the alumni presenting today. And I'm excited for the discussion. I've had a nice chance to kind of catch up with everybody and think you're going to really enjoy this afternoon. We're going to have each panelist introduce himself and talk a little bit about the connection between going to CYJ, being in Young Judea, and then being in the US military. I have some prepared questions I'm going to ask. I'll pose to the 3 panelists. We'll do that for about like 30 minutes, and then we'll open up questions to the group. All questions should be entered into the chat that we have. So just go to the bottom there or the side, wherever you have chat. You can ask your questions there, and then we have a few assistants in the crowd who will send me your questions. You can begin now to throw some questions out there anytime during the hour. Our only request is that the questions not be of a political nature. Around 1:30 Central Time, we're going to wrap it up. If you have questions after that or we don't get to your questions, feel free to send them to info@cyjmid.org. We'll forward them to the panelists. The panelists are happy to answer any questions people have. So let's get started. John, I'm going to ask you to go first, and then we'll go to Dan and then to Alex.
All right. Good afternoon / morning to everyone. I was a camper at CYJ Midwest. I was also on 7 for 3 years. My kids, all 4 kids have gone to CYJ Midwest. My mom was on the board for many, many years. I'm on the board currently. And my brother and sister also went to camp at CYJ Midwest. So there's a few of us Lows hanging around CYJ. I appreciate the opportunity to talk to all of you today because I probably wouldn't have been as successful as I was in the military, specifically the Air Force, if it wasn't for people like Barbara Bauman and many other Madrechim that really took someone who is somewhat an extrovert and really made me a much louder or larger than life extrovert. I think we look at Dan Vogel and we'll know that as well when you hear him talk as well, and along with Alex. Camp really made us become leaders early, and that showed for me when I was in the Air Force. I had many people, and you know this about rank structure, when someone compliments you in the military, if they're a lower rank, you're trying to figure out what their angle is. If they're a higher rank, you kind of want to know what their angle is too. But when someone of the same rank or a friend compliments you on a skill that you have, usually it's pretty candid and frank and honest. And I had numerous friends at the time tell me that not only was I a good leader, but I was a very good instructor. And I learned both of that from Young Judea. So I'm here on the board. I'm here talking to you now because of that. A little bit quick kind of update of what I did in the Air Force. I worked with intercontinental ballistic missiles for my first 8 years, so nuclear weapons, and then I moved over to space operations where I worked with GPS, comm satellites, space surveillance, and a little bit of spy satellites as well, when I was deployed, which is pretty interesting as well. So good times. I deployed to Iraq. I was in Iraq for 6 months, Afghanistan for a few days, been to South Korea, Hawaii, Germany, all around. So I've been around the world all because of Young Judea, which is interesting. I'll leave it at that for follow-up questions from Barb. I'll pass it off to one of my esteemed colleagues.
Thanks, John. So my name's Dan Vogel. Yes, John and I know each other from our camper days, and I had the privilege of meeting Alex when we got together about a week ago to coordinate. I grew up modern Orthodox in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, sorry. But to two Zionistic parents, but I was also modern Orthodox. So I was in NCSY and Young Judea, camper at CYJ Ortonville, then TY, and then was a counselor at CYJ Wapaka through the end of high school and college. My parents, specifically really even my mom, didn't want me to go into the Navy, but I wanted to fly from a very young age. My father traveled internationally. I loved going to the airport. And as my wife would say also, there was this little movie called Top Gun that came out, but like I said, my parents didn't want me necessarily to go in the military, but I was allowed to do whatever reading I wanted. And I was very interested in the Navy in World War II. So it was just kind of natural for me. I did ROTC at Virginia Tech. I graduated in 1994 and went down to flight school training, which kind of ended my Young Judea career to some extent in the 1995. Went out to San Diego by way of Young Judea after I got my wings of gold as a naval flight officer, which is the weapon systems officer, navigator, communicator in an airplane, and basically got trained and then did my initial fleet tours with 2 deployments in San Diego in an airplane that no longer is in the Navy called the S3 Viking. And most importantly, I met my wife. So that was good. And then I did follow-on assignments as an instructor in Pensacola, back again, then flew in E-2 Hawkeyes. I've done a tour being a liaison to the Department of Homeland Security, and I finished up and retired in a job out of the Pentagon, which is now where I live in the Silver Spring area. We have 3 wonderful children, 2 that are out of the house, 1 still in the house. One of the things that when we were talking about Young Judea was that Young Judea was pluralistic. So it taught me at a young age, being one of the more Orthodox people in Young Judea, that we can still all come together as different Jews and come up with activities and observances that work for everybody. And that also then is something that when you look at a melting pot of the US military for the United States, that's a very important lesson. The other, though, a lot of the lessons we learned in Young Judea that I think John and Alex would agree were the informal lessons on leadership that we learned even without knowing it. I don't know if he's on, I haven't been scrolling through, but John Winkle and I went from being campers at TY, complaining bitterly during the canoe trip about how cold it was on our MH canoe trip. And then next year, and I think, Barbara, maybe you were our Merkezer, it was maybe Tammy Fitzpatrick, it's all blurry, but we were on the canoe trip for Mahone at CYJ, and everybody was miserable and cold and whatever. And we were the ones going, no, it's not that bad. So you learn that sometimes positional stuff needs to alter how you portray your feeling on an activity. And I found that clearly is something in the military that you will use. I can't count how many times I learned, or used rather, some of those lessons of, yes, you really want to complain, but you have to go through a sort of higher purpose based off of where you are in the position that you're at. And that was an informal sort of lesson that Young Judea drove home through the years of being not only a co-leader of, when I was in WPA, but also as being a counselor at camp. And so with that, I will get off the stage and turn it over to the last member of the panel.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Alex Charney Cohen, originally from Lexington, Kentucky, and it's wonderful to see a lot of familiar and familial faces on the group, as well as my old roommate from Young Judea year course. A shout out to Mike Lasday. Also thought it was very cool that there was a picture, I'm sure it was from my sister, who had to have provided some of those camp pictures with Karen. So that was very cool. I hope you guys saw that picture. Anyhow, I'm the old man of this panel, and I began the chain of leadership training which continues literally. We are all connected through Barbara. She was a chanicha of mine when I led the Kesher group in Lexington. And from what I understand, the other two were either chanichim or worked for her in the structure of Tzevet. So how to say this? It's not that different from the military in that respect, right? There's this continuous flow, right? New people are always coming in, and the old folks at some point have to take a bow and move on, and fresh blood, and the movement evolves. And that sort of understanding of how organizations function and live is also something that I got from Young Judea. I started camp in 1973. I attended CYJ Michigan in 1973 and attended for 5 years until we took a trip to Israel. So I missed my last year at CYJ, then went on to Camp Tel Yehuda, where I met my lovely wife of 30 some odd years, 33, I guess, coming up on 34. And had a number of leadership jobs in the movement, region president, regional AVP. Never worked at camp though. It just never worked into my schedule, but the movement, of course, mom was on the camp committee, my sister's on the camp committee. We're pretty well bound up with the lows. So in terms of my military career, I graduated in 1987 from MIT, had a unique opportunity. My military experience is a little different from John and Dan's in that I went straight into the Air Force Reserve, never served on active duty, which is the more typical path when you get a scholarship. As a result, I ended up going into something called battle damage repair engineering, which I did for 8 years. Then we moved to the Pacific Northwest and I switched to civil engineering, which I did for 8 years, really a total of 16 years, 8 of which I was on a basically inactive status. And then when I came back from that inactive status, I went into bioenvironmental engineering, which is actually a medical career field, and ended my career as a commander of a medical unit in the Oregon Air National Guard. So we've seen, we don't have an Army representative, although my National Guard unit worked a lot with the Army. But we've got the Air Force, the Navy, the active and the reserve and the Guard all represented here today.
Great, thank you guys. Just have to remember to unmute myself. So really appreciate the intros. You know, I think for all of us, it's probably no surprise, like all these different connections. And I think so many of us can relate to the leadership skills that we gain from Young Judean, from working or being a camper at camp. Let me ask you guys next about being Jewish. The question came up from someone who, when they registered for today's webinar, and I think we've talked a little about it. Like, how did you handle in the military being different by virtue of being Jewish? And what did it mean to you to be Jewish in the military? Dan, do you want to start us off?
Sure. So I actually have a little bit of a Young Judea slide on this story. And it's gonna, you know, one of the, as John said, we, you know, he and I know that we both like to talk. For me, one of the holidays, I guess just to sketch this out, one of the holidays growing up, I didn't realize how important it was to some extent to be at home was Pesach. And I actually talked, for those of you who are Mason Voigt fans, I actually talked to Mason and I got permission to share this little part of it. My first year sort of being home and not trying to come home for Pesach, I was always coming home in college if I could, and I did. I was down in Pensacola in flight school. Very, you know, the more junior you are, I would say the same thing will go for all three of us, especially when you're new to any organization. The hardest thing it is sometimes to say, hey, I'm really different. I want to do this. It's important to me. The military is no different than that, especially the US military. And so I didn't want to rock the boat, and I got on my actually motorcycle at the time and went to Mason's house for Pesach. And it was very earth-shattering to me because, like, if you remember, I grew up modern Orthodox, and Mason was, his family in Mobile, Alabama. Mobile, Alabama was more on the Reform side, the conservative side. It was very different. And based off of that feeling, I said to myself, I always want to make sure that I make it home for Pesach. And the next year, when I was still in flight training, but I was a little bit more advanced, I had a letter that basically was from the Chief of Naval Air Training that said, "Let my people go." It basically said, if you have a student and he wants to go home for Passover, you have to let him go. So I walk into, and he was in the Air Force, he was the head of the Student Control Division. I said, "Hey, I want to go home." And he looked at me and he started giving me a hard time. He said, "Well, what are you going to do if you're on an aircraft carrier in the middle of the Persian Gulf? Ensign Vogel, are you going to want to go home?" And I said, "Well, but I'm not. I'm here in Pensacola." So we went back and forth, and then long story short, was able to go home, and it was very meaningful to be back in home for Passover. And this is in the mid 90s, so emails, especially for the whole military, wasn't such a thing. I wish I would have gotten an email form, because in the late spring of 2000, I would have sent him an email saying, "I'm on the USS John C. Stennis. I'm in the middle of the Persian Gulf. I'm setting up a Passover Seder. So take that, Captain," I think his name was Breckenridge or something like that. Because that's where I was. We koshered out part of the captain's import cabin on a carrier. Everything reminds you that you're on a ship and not, but the captain of the ship, was a big enough important person, has like this little dining room down on where wood paneling and stuff like that. And we worked it out, and about 10 of us or so got together, and we had a Passover Seder. And the last little snippet of the story about, when you push for certain things, God helps you out as well, is that, we basically had to fend for ourselves. I did some wheeling and dealing with the ship supply officer and got everything but a kosher shank bone. The Jewish war veteran sent out a bunch of kits that we then dispersed all the other ships in the battle group. And then, we had a little, different, we actually got a Haggadah that we used, but we didn't know, whether we had any kind of stuff for Seder plates. Carriers are dry, as in there's no alcohol allowed on board except for sacramental purposes. So as Jews, we got our little nasty Manischewitz Kiddush wine allotment for deployment. And I was going to get it out because we were going to drink 4 cups. And the Stennis was a new ship. So we, certain things were in different places. We didn't know. There's one enlisted officer saw me walking with a yarmulke and actually dressed up more normally than we would be. As my wife liked to say, we all wear green pajamas to work, and said, "I know what you're looking for." I was like, "Yeah, no, I got the key. I'm getting the wine." She's like, "No." She leads me to the back corner of the storage room in the chapel. And in there is a whole Seder plate, Kos Eliyahu, everything. Perfectly untouched, never been messed with since the boat pulled out of the yard, somehow part of the generic issue that nobody knew about. And so I actually brought the wine and that with me to the Seder on the captain's ship. There's a lot of other stuff with the story. Like I said, we all like to talk, but really the lesson of that, and I still have that Haggadah with me, and I try and use it at least one of the 2 Sidorim of Pesach, is that, the more you push and the more you try and at least not be afraid to show that you're slightly different, as well as show that you're, and try and find ways to do things, it can be extremely rewarding. And that's not to say that it wasn't always, or that it was always easy to say, "Hey, I'd like to do something different." But as long as people felt like it was coming from a good place, then you got more out of it than you ever thought you were going to get.
Thank you. John or Alex, do you want to answer the question?
Go ahead, Alex.
Okay, so I've got a quick story. I think it's easier to be different as an officer. There are simply rights and privileges, accommodations made for officers that I suspect it's much harder for the enlisted folks. We were on a deployment up to Alaska, and we had worked very hard all week so that we worked extra long days so that we could have a day off to do a 3-day weekend. And I decided I wanted to go to Friday night services at this congregation, the Frozen Jews of the North, they call themselves, in Anchorage. And I showed up, and people were incredibly welcoming. It's not terribly surprising that the unfamiliar faces that they see in that congregation typically are connected to the Air Force. And it was was really, it's a very special memory to do that. But in general, it just, part of it is, as a weekend warrior, I didn't have to hit a lot of the holidays. And there were very few years where they scheduled a guard weekend on an important holiday. And I'm confident, although I can't remember a specific example, that if I simply rescheduled, I could work around the holidays. So that generally worked out.
John?
All right, I've got one quick story and one medium long story. The quick one was, I remember my mom and father telling me about when my dad was in the Air Force, about him specifically working on Christmas and Easter to free up at least one slot for someone who was participating in those holidays. And so I did the same. When I was working on Nuclear Alert, which is a 24-hour alert underground, I chose to work Christmas and Easter, and it was great. But when I asked off for Yom Kippur, my squadron commander said no. And I was a young lieutenant. And I said to him, "Sir, I would like you to reconsider and think about it overnight." And he said, "Wow, you've got a lot of chutzpah." He didn't say that. I'm not going to say what he said. And he did. And he came back the next day and called me into his office and said, "I talked with my wife and she told me I was being an idiot." He said, "I know that you work Christmas and Easter and you can definitely have your holidays off." He said, "You have been selfless and there's no reason why I should be otherwise." So that's one story, which was really cool because it really set up my time in the Air Force for educating people. When people found out I was Jewish, I would educate them. Because most of it was ignorance when I met people who hadn't met anyone who was Jewish. But the bigger story I want to tell you was I was also deployed to Qatar for about 4 months. And this was back in 2005. I decided that I wanted to go to services. I'm not very religious, but I consider myself, very cultural when it comes to Judaism. But I wanted to go to services because I wanted to face West. It was something I wanted to do in Qatar, which is right next to Saudi Arabia. You're going to face West to Israel. So there, which was really interesting, the Jewish lay leader there was another major. I was a major at the time, and he and I became real close. And about 3 months later, he gets an invite from Israel's deputy chief of mission in Qatar to bring 4 people with him to Pesach dinner. And this is off base in an Arabic country, which is a really big no-no. You don't leave base in an Arabic country, especially to go do something that has to do with Judaism. Like, that's really scary. That's a scary thing. And the wing commander, the Air Force wing commander, knew all these things and told us we were not allowed to go. The Jewish lay leader told him the same thing I told you about my previous story. Jewish lay leader who was a major told the full bird, said, "Sir, I think you should think on it for the night." So he came back and said, "Okay, you can go with 4 other people." So he chose me and 3 enlisted. So Alex, this is really neat. So 2 majors and 3 enlisted. We get in a car and we're escorted by security police about 20 miles into town. And we get there and I've never felt safer in my life. There are only the family and Mossad agents. There's 2 on the roof. There's 4 patrolling the house outside, and there's 2, 1 at dinner with us and 1 walking around inside the house. It was incredible. And talk about not allowed to drink alcohol. We're not allowed to drink alcohol while deployed, and the deputy chief of mission wouldn't hear of it. He insisted we drink a couple glasses of wine, which was a super big treat while deployed. What's more interesting to this story is that after I deployed and came home, I had to go to South Korea to do some exercise planning in South Korea. And on the way to dinner one night, I was in the Hilton Millennium Hotel in Seoul, South Korea. I get on the elevator and it goes down a few floors and someone comes on and starts speaking Hebrew to me. Now you have to understand, someone in South Korea gets on the elevator while I'm alone and starts speaking Hebrew to me. I don't know enough Hebrew except for my time on Hadracha. I had a few sentences that I absolutely used, and one of them was "Ani lo dober ivrit," which is I don't speak Hebrew in Hebrew. And this guy, it threw him for a loop. He kind of switched to English and said, "How did you know not to say I can't speak Hebrew in Hebrew?" And I let him know a little bit of my background, and he dismissed it and went on. But it turns out that guy was trying to recruit me, and it had to do with my time back in Qatar at the Deputy Chief of Missions House for Pesach. So they wanted obviously some information from me. The Israelis did, and it failed, which was interesting because I threw him off so bad. So there's a really long story. Thank you.
You know, one quick, just John, exact same thing. I stood, you know, and actually I would do Christmas Eve and Christmas Day. Every single squadron I was in, Easter. It was great for us because we worked on a point system for duty. So that normally got me out of having to serve duty on January. And we actually, you know, but I would always do that because I think it was important to say, you know, the important holidays for me are these holidays. I'm not going to try and game it. The interesting thing, just to go along with that, as far as, you know, sometimes when you have COs or XOs. So I, unfortunately, for those of you who don't know if this is a shot, my father, Walter Vogel, for those of you who didn't know him, he passed away in 2001 when I was on an instructor tour. So I was in the year of ALIS, and I didn't want to go to the holiday party that year. The year before, I had even done the invocation. And so I walked into the executive officer, and I said to him, I don't want to go. I'll stand duty that would typically be a student's role. I'll stand so that he can go. And he and I went back and forth. The CO, and this was a guy who was very politically correct about everybody needs to be religious, but now I was asking to make a decision, and he didn't want it. The last part of the story, and this is where the thing I think for me that I learned this probably in everything, including Young Judea, was at the very end of my time in the squadron, you know, you get a chance, you know, you're doing exit interviews. And so this same officer asked me, is there anything that I did that you didn't like? And that was his pro forma question he always asked. And in the back of my mind, I can hear my wife and about 5,000 other people going, Dan, keep your mouth shut. But it's Dan Vogel. And so I looked at him and I said, you know, you really upset me when, you know, I was your high flight time instructor, you know, instructor of the year for the whole training wing and the whole Navy. And yet I'm asking you because of my father for a religious reason to not go to a holiday party, and you gave me a hard time about it. It's like, well, you don't understand. I'm a commander in the US Navy. And I looked back at him and I said, no, you don't understand. You don't outrank God. At which point I won and left, and he got to contemplate that probably for about half a second until he went off. But you will meet, I agree with everybody, it's easier to be an officer, but even if you're an officer and even if you're getting up in rank, it's still not necessarily always easy. You will meet people, whether they're Jewish or not Jewish, you know, religious or not religious, that want to push you or try and see whether you really will. And you just got to learn to stand your ground. And Young Judea kind of teaches you that as well. Probably with what, mock UN or something like that.
Great, thank you. I actually want to build off of what you're saying, but before I move to my next question, I just want to encourage folks. I know we've had a few questions in the chat. Feel free to put in more questions. We'll open it up in a little while, and I'm happy for the ones that have been there, happy to have a few more come our way. But I want to kind of build off of, Dan, what you said and what all of you guys have kind of like alluded to, which is that you learn some skills in Young Judea and CYJ that you then carried into the military. And I wondered if you guys can go a little more specific into what were some of those skills? How did that transfer work? And especially, I know you guys were all officers, you know, how did that help in terms of leading other people? Who would like, Alex, do you want to start?
Sure. So more than a skill for me, my answer is probably going to be a little different than the other two. Part of being an officer is being very, very comfortable in your own skin. It's very difficult to lead people if you don't know who you are, where your guideposts are, and where you stand. And one of the things, probably the biggest thing that my 5 years at CYJ specifically gave me was a very strong sense of my own Jewish identity. I connected in ways that I never did through Hebrew school or even growing up in a wonderful Jewish family. I had that. It was
Did we just lose Alex?
Uh,
There, you're back. You're back.
okay. Anyway, I knew who I was, and that's really the single biggest thing. I mean, of course, there are lots of hadracha things in the Mahon year at TY, but for me, the single biggest thing was really just my Jewish identity.
Who wants to take it from there? Go ahead, John.
So I kind of alluded to it in the beginning, but being an instructor and teaching, I was so comfortable with it so early on in my career, and had everything to do with Young Judea, getting in front of people and talking. You know, you can call it public speaking, you can call it instructing. Alex, being comfortable in your own skin is just dead on correct. I was able to get in front of my peers and teach and just be comfortable doing it. I did it so well that we had an inspector general visit, and they all put me in front of him to teach. And the inspector general actually came back and gave me a coin, which is a pretty big deal, and told me, he goes, "I never understood that subject until you taught it today," which is really scary that the inspector general should have known this. And he and I actually talked just a few weeks ago, and this was over 20 years ago. And he says, to this day, I'll remember, I know exactly what you taught me, because I really faked it until then. So it was pretty incredible. And it really came down to being able to teach and be a madrich. And when I was on Maskirut, you know, I did Ofi Sofi conventions and Ofi Sofi programming. So I knew how to do lesson plans already. And that went a long way. And being an instructor in the military, it means that you're better than most, because you obviously know the topic. And I definitely owe Young Judea that. Dan?
I mean, I agree with everything you and Alex are saying. I think, you know, one of the other things that I think I besides, you know, like being comfortable in your own skin, and also, I'm trying to figure out, now I'm thinking on the fly, I'm probably going off of where I wanted to go, but I think it teaches, Young Judea taught me how to build connections with different people, like that, like you said, that are outside of just what, you know, we all kind of grow up, even though, you know, where I love to say Squirrel Hill is the Jewish ghetto in Pittsburgh. I mean, you know, we have a little bit of everything there. You know, I see, I don't know, he's now off the screen, but, you know, oh no, there's, you know, like Mikey Lasday's on there, you know, I mean, just even for people who weren't local to Squirrel Hill, you know, would come into Pittsburgh and they'd see it, right? But yet, I had never really, until I went, you know, to CYJ Midwest, met, you know, people from Chicago or all those other places, that you all of a sudden you realize you're the Far East, so to speak, coming from Pittsburgh, and then magnify that by 100 by the military, right? So now you have to learn how to connect with different people, and also then how to get someplace, you know, with them, and yet still stay who you are. So you know, I guess to pick off of something that Alex just said, you know, Young Judea teaches you how to determine different guideposts for you, that you would say, this is what, even while you're trying to come up with, and we at a very, you know, early age as madrichim, or, you know, or even chanichim, you know, different ways to look at a problem. But even while you're coming up with those different ways to look at problems, you still have to be able to know what are the things you're going to look at as your guideposts. And the last little thing, and I found this more in Young Judea than I found this in, you know, my schooling, non-military schooling, was the fact that sometimes it was okay to not have the perfect answer, right? You know, I remember some of the pulot we did on conventions. I was like, especially during the heyday of Intifada and other, you know, the beginning part, that, you know, they would actually make, you know, like, tell me another Jewish youth group that would say, and you guys are the Palestinians, right now. And then you all of a sudden realize that you have to look at those people as people, and that there isn't necessarily going to always be the perfect solution, because, you know, I still, and I'm not going to tell the whole story because it's too long, but, you know, you in the military, that is so true, that you have to be comfortable with the fact that you aren't going to make everybody happy, and that there is no perfect solution. And I think, you know, we do that in military training. I know we definitely didn't do that like in high school and middle school, but we definitely got that in Young Judea also. And then not everybody's gonna be happy sometimes for a solution, and there is no perfect thing.
Thank you. Yeah, I can so relate to all these different stories. A few people have asked how you guys decided to go into the armed forces, decided to do ROTC, and then, you know, the military. Where do we want, John, do you want to start with that?
Yeah, mine's pretty simple. My father did ROTC at Syracuse. I was at Syracuse. I finished my freshman year. I was coming to the end of my freshman year at Syracuse and realized international relations with a topic area in the Middle East was not going to get me a job. So I decided, hey, I know a guy who did Rotc here, my dad. I'm going to follow in his footsteps. I went to ROTC and said, hey, can I join my sophomore year? And they said, sure, you just have to do a little extra work that year to catch up. So I did, and I joined. I got commissioned after I graduated, and I did it for security reasons, as in like for a job, but I stayed for many other reasons, mostly because I knew it was a perfect fit and a calling for me. So that's my story.
Can you expand a little on the perfect fit part? Do you mind?
It really, gosh, it keeps on coming back to young Judea. It does, being able to lead people, I always said I was an informal leader. I was able to lead all the time. Not all the time. That's too self-satisfying. I was able to be an informal leader whenever it was necessary, and I enjoyed it. And then when I told you about the moment where my peers wanted me to start teaching and instructing, I realized I was actually really good at it and didn't know it. And I continued down that road. I taught at Air Command Staff College when I was a major. I taught all the time, and I enjoyed it. I taught at the schoolhouse for missile training for 3 years. It just was something that came natural and was really easy to do. And I was having fun. I know Dan and Alex both know that. We stayed until we stopped having fun, didn't we? And that was probably, I was 21 years in and realized, okay, it's time. I'm not having fun anymore. So there you go.
I'd like to go next, if that's okay. So my dad was also in the Air Force, although he was not an officer, and he had actually done the reserves. I was looking at my options for college and thinking about college and paying for college, and I really didn't want my parents to have to bear the load. So I actually applied for a Naval ROTC scholarship and an Air Force ROTC scholarship, got them both. Ended up choosing the Air Force, I think pretty wisely, because we don't have those 6 months away. Fully anticipated and expected that I would go and do my 4 years to repay my debt and see how it went from there. I applied as a graduating senior, and the big question was I wanted to go on your course. And I didn't feel confident in my ability to get the scholarship twice. So I had made the personal decision that if they were not willing to defer my scholarship, I was going to go on to school. And quite frankly, the nameless major who made that decision, I really wish I knew his name, and said, yeah, we can defer your scholarship, changed the course of my life. I didn't go on active duty. I probably would have ended up serving for 20 years because I had such a good time. With the option, again, it was a very strange time. The Graham-Rudman Budget Reduction Act had the Air Force in particular scrambling to figure out how they were going to reduce by 1%. And one of their solutions was to not take in new commissionees from the ROTC program. So they gave me the option. Do you want to go active duty or do you want to go into the reserves? And I chose to go into the reserve because by that point, when I was graduating, my at that time future wife and still current wife was not particularly interested in being an Air Force wife, which she did very, very well for 30 years, to be fair, to her credit. So I chose the reserve. Also, I could make more money in the civilian sector as a second lieutenant. And And so my commitment was 4 years. And I said, I will do my 4 years because I owe my country that. And it was a lot of fun. It was interesting. It was a different world. I like to tell my mother that for me, it was sort of like a club, like the Lions or the Rotary Club. And it kind of felt like that, right? I would go away for one weekend a month and I would be in a uniform. We would all dress the same. We would do this cool mission. And so it was very much like that, but at a higher level. She was always very uncomfortable. Maybe I should just join the Rotary Club if that's what I needed and not put, my life in danger. But so sorry for telling stories on you, Mom, but that's how I came to it and ended up sticking around. And of course, at the end, once you're a commander, you really want to keep being a commander. I timed out. The maximum time that you're allowed to serve is 28 years. I was fortunate enough to actually get 2 bonus years to allow me to fill out my almost 3 years of command. So I'm thankful to the officers that allowed me to do that as well.
Thank you. Go ahead, Dan.
So I don't really have anything altruistic here. Maybe to say there's a specific person. My father was in the Army during Korea, not in Korea though, and basically he had a job. He went to law school and he was in ROTC, which was a different program then. But he was well out of the military by the time I was born. Like I said before, I'm an adrenaline junkie. I wanted to fly, and landing airplanes on and off aircraft carriers seemed kind of cool. So that's, I started, the woman on the left there of me, on my right at my commission, my father commissioned me. She fought me on it for a long time. And then I won her over by said, Mom, if people of conscience don't join the military, then you dubs get what you deserve. And that ended the debate. In high school, I did Navy ROTC. I guess, just to pick on just a couple of interesting things. One of the reasons, I would have paid the Navy to do what I was doing when I first started getting in. I mean, you're as a junior officer, yes, you're leading enlisted sort of because you're the officer, but they're really teaching you almost as much as you're leading them. But I was flying on and off aircraft carriers, and I can't think of a better fun thing to do. The interesting thing, just to peel off of something that Alex said, also, I was doing Young Judea in the summers, but I would do, the way ROTC worked is I was doing 4 months of training for ROTC, and then I was going off to work as a camp counselor, and that's where all my buddies were. But every single semester I had to put in a Navy elective for ROTC, and and as mechanical engineering, I had such a heavy course load. I was didn't have time for all the other electives that you need to graduate. So I had the Navy pay for an extra 6 months of school because it was their fault anyway. And by doing that, I got commissioned in December of 1994. If I hadn't, the airplane that I wanted to get in was going away, the A6. That's what I wanted to. I wanted to fly around and drop bombs on people. They were going away, and the way the budget things were going, they were trying to keep all those people. And so there were, if you know the famous Top Gun movie, right, F-14 Top Guns, there were 4 slots the entire fiscal year for newly winged officers, and those were all gone by the time I was up for assignment. And that's why I got sent out to San Diego to fly in the S3. If I don't, I'm in Norfolk. I'm maybe less religious, not married to the woman I've been married to for 22 years with 3 wonderful children, just because of some small little decision. So I guess I'll leave you with one final, in the military, we always joked about it. They're called orders, not requests. You never get your choice. The other guys nodding, and everybody's been in the military, hey, I really want to do this. I think, and you line up, you're talking to the guy who's in charge of your next, I think it's great. You're going here. But yeah, nice. And I always called the detailer, which is what we call the personnel, the hand of God, because I never knew exactly how I was going there, but I would say I went everywhere that I was supposed to be for where I'm at now. And I got out. I missed the Navy terribly. I don't regret 1 second my decision to get out. It was the right decision for me personally. It was the right decision for me professionally. Even though I was supposed to, according to my ROTC captain, as a mechanical engineer with a good GPA, be a nuclear power officer on a submarine. And he tried to make the whole call to me of, you'll make a lot of money when you get out on the outside. And I said, if I join the Navy for the money, I'm an idiot. So nobody joins the military for the money. I'll just tell you that right now, in case they're, I think you said, Barbara, we may have some younger people or things. You don't join the military for the GI Bill. You do not join the military for housing allowance or for the beautiful garden spots that you are going to be sent to. You join the military because you're interested in the job, you're interested in being part of a group that is mission focused. I'm not trying to, and to some extent, you're patriotic for your country.
Great, thank you. Another question that's been asked in the chat is, having interacted with your friends over many decades, how have you seen impressions, opinions of the U.S. military change among friends over those decades? Who would like to take this one? John?
So it's interesting because, when I was, on staff on 7 at CYJ, I specifically remember Mason Voigt singing war protest songs. And I think he did it around me to get my goat. And it's funny because I remembered it so much because it would get me, I'd be like, why am I getting upset? And then I realized there's no reason to get upset. That's just my friend getting my goat. But I think that the opinion has changed from the middle of the 90s to, well, why are you doing that, John? To, wow, John, that's pretty cool. It really had to do with 9/11. And I wonder how the opinions would be. I think the opinions really are starting to sway back to that again. Like, why would a Jew join the military? My grandma thought Jews should not be in the military because her family is from Russia. And in Russia, they just conscripted people into the military. So it all really depends on your background and what kind of baggage you're carrying at the time, I think. I have tremendous support of my family, of course, and all my friends. Everyone I know has given me such fantastic support. It's just interesting because I didn't join it to be popular. I didn't join the military to be popular, and all of a sudden it's become something that's just grown and to the point where we have a panel discussion on a Sunday with a bunch of people that I grew up with. I mean, this is humbling, and it's really what it comes down to. It's been humbling for the past 20 years. I'm not sure if I answered your question, but I sure had to get that off my chest.
Sounded good to me. Alex or Dan, do you guys want to take it?
I don't know. I mean, Alex, I see his face. For me, I think I was always with Young Judea. I was always a Judean first, right? Nobody in Young Judea expected us to change, and or see us on TV, doing something that they would be embarrassed by, because I think that's what I'm saying. I don't know if I can't answer the question because I don't ever feel like somebody in Young Judea judging me by the military or asking why, or it's just, okay, this is kind of what I chose to do. And my Judean friends that were Judean friends before I joined the military are my Judean friends now. It's just I ended up having to have a job that was a little bit different.
Great, thank you. So I have a few kind of wrap up kind of questions that have come up that I think I can combine into one. So one question is, what are you doing now? And another question is, what advice do you have for younger people who may be considering going to ROTC or going into the military? Who'd like to, Dan or Alex, anybody, who'd like to?
Go ahead, Alex.
All right. So I am also a mechanical engineer like Dan, although I specialize primarily in manufacturing engineering. So I am currently a manufacturing engineer for a small company that we make backup power generators based on hydrogen fuel cell technology. So we take methanol water, that's our fuel, and we put that into the system and out comes electricity. And I'm responsible for working with the designers to make sure that we have a process to make it in a way that it works the way they intended it to. Before the pandemic, I set up a factory in South Africa, which is perhaps one of the highlights of my career. It's always been, as a manufacturing engineer, a bucket list item to set up a factory from a green field, as we call it. Just a blank sheet of paper. How do we want to build our factory? So I spent 3/4 of my time from October 2019 through February 2020 away from my family most of the time, traveling all the time, not knowing what time of day it was, having a blast. And then got home, and 2 weeks later, I was working from home. So I have been able to, thanks to the gifts of technology, the wonders of technology, support my factory in South Africa, work with the parent company. We also have a factory in Taiwan. So the sun never sets on my company.
And any advice you have for young people considering it?
So this may sound a little flip, but if you are seriously interested in serving, I think it's wonderful. We need people. We need good people to serve. It is much easier to serve as an officer. The lifestyle of an officer, the pressures are different. The expectations are higher, but it's a much easier life. So strongly consider that. And second, of the military branches, the Air Force is widely viewed as the more technical. One of my Army guys always said to me, he told me the story like 3 or 4 times, whenever you're deployed and something's broken and the uniform is Air Force of the guy that's coming to fix it, you feel a lot better. So I have a tremendous amount of respect for the Navy and for the Army and the Marines, but I'm biased. What can I say? Go Air Force.
Thank you. I feel like, Dan, did we just set you up?
No, I mean, I'm not, I'm not going to get involved in a Navy versus Air Force. I'm outnumbered 2 to 1. First of all, I'll say right now, and I'm not trying to be flippant here, but I have no idea who's on this call, and it's being recorded and everything else like that. So, I think John's going to take sort of probably the same tack, which is I work as a government contractor right now. And that's really, pretty much what I'm going to say necessarily. I still do military related stuff as far as what I do, not knowing everywhere it's going and knowing that Young Judea is international. Allow me to be cheesy and just say I still do that. I'm also happy to be, doing and learning, like skills I learned in Young Judea as what do you do with a bunch of volunteers, right? I'm the synagogue president. So there you go. That's like 20 years in military with a leadership lab for being synagogue president during COVID. I would agree, and I think John's going to definitely my advice, and I'm happy to speak to anybody who has people who are thinking about going in, just like I've been doing for years when they find out you're a Jew. Being an officer is way easier. And yet also then realizing whether it's Young Judea or other stuff, that there is a network of other Jews, both inside and outside the service, that are willing to help you, as well as other people that when they see that you're committed, and that you take personal responsibility, and you're not just like what I like to say is raising the Jew card because you want to be a Jew to get out of something, or that you will get further that way. You have to have a plan. You have to know what you want to do, especially if you want to be an officer. You should be used to people testing you out to see if you're really committed by saying no, whether it's before you're in or when you're in. And there are various different ways to get into the service, but absolutely be an officer. The last thing I'll kind of leave a story on that is, I'll try and put it together fast, is think outside the box and realize those people that are willing to work with you. So I was one of my other squadrons, this is one in Norfolk, I wanted to celebrate Sukkot. We had training that we had to go to. One of the things I tell people is that it's not a question of when your Judaism and what your level of commitment is going to be, or if rather, it's going to be put to the test. It's a question of when, right? Especially if you do 20 years, there is going to be a time when you are going to have to figure out what that non-perfect answer is. But I, went into my CO and said, hey, I really want to spend the first night with my family. And basically what we did was there was the squadron duty room that we would almost never use because people, unless there was late flight ops, would go home for the night. They let me use that. I bought a one-man sukkah online, set it up outside, spent the first night with my family, then walked 8 miles, went to, basically had, my morning davening and ate a little bit of some meals that we, stuff we prepared, and then walked, to the class that we had to go to. Flash forward to, and there's a Young Judea tie into this, I'm going to skip, but, the 6 months later, we were going to a major training evolution in Fallon, Nevada, which is a real garden spot. Almost, if you like better bases, don't go to the Air Force. Navy has much better bases than most of the garden spots of the Air Force. I look at John, where he lives right now in Oklahoma. But I walked into my CO and said, I want to pay my own ticket out to California, to Reno, Nevada, so that I can actually spend the last couple days of the holiday with Jews in Sacramento, and I will show up Monday morning ready to go. Because I can't do any of the free, I can't fly in an airplane because you guys are flying during the holiday and I don't want to go on the airlift. I'll pay my own way. He's like, he had already learned that I'm nuts, right? So he said, sure, go right ahead. It ends up being that, and this is maybe Navy aircraft versus Air Force aircraft, they came out with something like as I land and he said, I'll even let you pick up my rental car. I want a Hemi. So I pick up his rental car at the Reno airport. He calls me up. He says, hey, and my call sign was Millhouse. He's like, Millhouse, I'm really glad you're a crazy Jew because they just downed all of our aircraft for a major maintenance item. You're going to be the senior ranking officer above the pay grade of the O2. So for the whole squadron, because nobody else, the airlift already left and nobody else can really fly out there. But then I went to Sacramento and spent a beautiful holiday with people I'd never met before. Non-Jews don't understand that. Everybody in Judea understands that, right? You just call up, say, hey, I need a place. And you could do that whether you're Young Judean or anywhere else. Yeah, sure. And then, eventually the squadron showed up. So be true to yourself, learn to kind of push the limits, which I think Young Judea taught me. Any of my campers on here that remember that I'd probably like to push the limits. Thank God there were no cell phone cameras that you guys had back in CYJ then. And then also make sure, just like we're talking now on this panel, get information from 5,000 other people about what their experience was like, and then figure out how you're going to go about doing it.
Thank you, John. You want to wrap up where you live and your advice and what you're doing now?
Yes. So Omaha. I know, Dan, that's tough. I told you before it's Omaha, not Oklahoma.
I know. I keep saying Oklahoma, Omaha. You got me again.
I'm gonna fly out to West Virginia and get you to that.
Maryland. Offutt is such a fun place.
No, I'm not. We love the Midwest, and that's why we're here. So I would highly recommend anyone who wants to join the military, talk to someone who's been in or is in. That's the best way to go about it. I've had numerous people come and talk to me. Even now, I have a hockey coach that works for me. In his off time, he works for me. He's a hockey coach for kids, and he brings his high school age kids in all the time to talk to me about the Air Force. And I'm happy to do that with anyone else. I love to talk about it. I ran a recruiting squadron, and I was deputy group commander for recruiting, so I know recruiting well, and I also won't lie. So that's what I've prided myself on, the position I'm in right now. Position I'm in right now, I am a defense contractor, but I'm a program manager. I have about 120 other defense contractors, and I do the hiring and firing and everything else for that position here at Offutt Air Force Base in Omaha. And it's incredibly rewarding. It's also very frustrating because I'm still working with the government, and Dan and Alex absolutely know that working with the government is harder than working for the government, because once you're not part of the government anymore, you can be easily frustrated. So that's what I deal with on a day-to-day basis. And yes, Dan, you hit it correctly. We both have clearances and we can't talk about a lot of things we do. Heck, my sister's texting me right now. Tell me you're a spy, John, because I don't know what you do either.
I mean, just because we're retired doesn't mean the classified information we learned is no longer classified, if anybody's wondering.
That's right.
Somebody asked me that the day after I retired. What's the coolest piece of classified information you know?
Yeah, I signed a 99-year non-disclosure agreement when I was a second lieutenant. So I've got a few more years left on the 99 years. And that's about all I got for those questions. Barbara, back to you.
Thank you. Well, as expected, of course, time has completely flown this afternoon. It's time to wrap things up a little bit. You know, John, Dan, Alex, thank you so much for sharing with us your experiences, your insights. I also want to thank Ellen, Maida, Rachel, and Liz for putting together this wonderful alumni event. And of course, the biggest thanks to Robin Anderson, our CYJ Midwest Director, and Kevin Freitas, our Marketing and Communications Manager, who made this actual reality, made it actually happen. As they say on NPR, today's program was made possible by donors like you. So now is a great time to give. CYJ Midwest just became eligible to receive a 1-to-2 match as part of the Altogether Now 2021 matching grant from the Harold Grinspoon Foundation. So help us hit our Bring It Home goal of $100,000. You can see the information there on the screen. You can also honestly just go to cyjmid.org and hit the donate button. You can always donate in honor of others like our wonderful presenters today. And if you donated to CYJ in 2020, which looking through the list, I know many of you did, we do have an amazing thank you lined up. This is our first time. We're very excited to be doing a thank you event. Mark your calendars for March 7th. Adina Sussman, cookbook author of Sababa, is going to be doing a demonstration for us. So if you donated in 2020, you'll be getting an email this week from us with registration information. If you want more information, you can always bother the folks at the CYJ office. They're happy to provide it. You can follow CYJ on Facebook, on Instagram. I mean, my kids don't let me have Instagram, but many of you may have it. However you want to follow CYJ, you can. Also, our alumni presenters have agreed to stick around for a few more minutes. So your call right now, head out, hang around, whatever you want to do. Thank you for making CYJ a part of your afternoon. Take care, be safe. Remember, every day is a special day at CYJ. Thank you, guys. Everyone feel free to unmute, talk, or throw stuff in the chat, whatever you'd like. Have a good afternoon.
Nice to see everyone.
Hello, Hello from Salt Lake City.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Go up to gallery on there here.
Yeah.
Good looking group, I have to say. Lexington showed up.
Thank you, Mom.
And that.
Lexington always.
Okay.
So who's on?
Yeah.
All right, I need a good bachelor. If anybody knows a good man for me, I would be really happy.
Lots of functions here at CYJ.
Oh, is it still recorded? Please delete
Maybe that should be an upcoming event.
There you go.
I like seeing Ann Lowe on there. I always got nervous when the parents of like these, you know, like in the Miffy Nagorskis and everybody else would show up to camp, that we had to be on better behavior. So, you know, John, thanks to your mom for making sure that we kept it, you know, politically correct. That was like the first picture I saw. Good to see you, Mr.
No, I thought for a minute he was. I thought he did. I think I sent a note to him.
Really? Do you guys want to contribute? I hear you guys are there.
Yeah.
I'm not sure what you mean about politically correct. What did I do that was politically correct?
No. We knew when you guys showed up that some of the other, well, not John. John was always the best behaved counselor and camper ever, but everybody else sometimes, you know, Barry, if it's on here, would know that we were all really well behaved all the time. Nobody following the rules. But then when the parents showed up of the actual counselors, and we sometimes realized we may have to, you know, so.
I do remember when we'd have camp committee meetings at the camp that the food was extra special good. So everybody liked those days.
Yeah. So as one of the oldest people here on the screen, first of all, thank you to the three of you for doing this wonderful presentation, and Barbara and everybody on the committee for putting it together. This was a brilliant idea, and I'm glad you recorded it because I hope you'll continue to promote having people watch it, even if they couldn't be on today. And it was very fun to see the proud mothers of of these guys, and that's pretty neat because both of you were on the camp committee.
So stay more on the right. Proceed. Yeah.
And it's great to see the fruits of our labors, and just keep going, you guys. It's been wonderful.
Why has Dan Richter named himself my name?
I know, I was curious too.
Take a guess, Dan. It's just what Dan Richter does.
Family.
It's just that he's Team Dan. That's all. He's Team Dan.
Wait, John, was that you may have already been going to camp before that, but Neil Sachs was our counselor, right? I think like 15 years, Sophie, right? Was that your first year? That was my first year. I don't know if it was your.
No, I went started in Overeem, but he was my counselor once or twice at least.
Yeah, so Neil was one of your counselors, Dan?
Yeah, and we're still here to talk about it.
Yeah, the years that he was at CYJ. So he's currently in Vermont and getting ready to, we now live in Seattle, and he's currently in Vermont, but getting ready to move back out to the Pacific Northwest. Hey, Cheryl. And yeah, so we'll have to have a CYJ reunion out here when he gets back. He'll be in Bellevue, Bellingham. There are all these beaming. He'll be in Bellingham, Washington, which is about 80 miles north of Seattle. So anybody who wants to reconnect with young Judea out here, y'all come.
I love Neil. Neil grew up with him, being from the Chicago CYJ Midwest, now in Utah, but.
I know my kids always used to kid me that wherever they were traveling in the US, I would know somebody in Hadassah there. And they would always say, oh, Mom, I would always say, if there was ever an emergency, I know somebody in Hadassah who's in that city. And they still kid me about it. But I'm going to tell you that my husband.
That's because you still say it, Mom.
Yeah, I do. So I live in Tucson, Arizona. If you ever need a friend or a place to stay, we have a guest room, and you're all welcome.
Hey, have you met my friend Deanna Rosen? She's not a young Judean, but she moved from Salt Lake City to Tucson like 5 years ago with her husband.
I don't know if I know her.
Well, Ann, I know you're serious because I remember on our days off, we used to go to your house when you were in Wisconsin.
That's right. That's right. We used to have 5 or 6 of you sleeping on the floor.
Can I say hello to Fred Wasserman?
That's my dad.
Fred. It's
Dad.
Rena Kogan.
Oh, talking about going
Dad,
across
you're
the
muted.
country, one of my favorite stories about your counselor, Neil, when Neil himself may have been a counselor at that time, or may have been at Tel Yehuda or at Young Judea Midwest. But there were about 4 or 5 of them together, and they were visiting somebody, and he asked each of the, I call them kids, where they were from, And it may have been New York, and one says New York, and one said Michigan, and one said New Jersey, and the other one said Ohio, and the other one said New York, and they came to Neil and he said Kentucky. And they said, no, where are you really from? And most often we were asked because we left Seattle, almost 60 years ago, and spent almost 60 years in Lexington, Kentucky before coming here because our kids were here. But most often the question we were asked and have been asked, we say we're from Kentucky, and they say, there are Jews in Kentucky? And we have a good Kentucky Lexington contingent on here, as I see Judy Bauman nodding her head, and Gail is on, and somebody who grew up in Kentucky like Cheryl is on.
And Polly Goldman.
Yeah. Oh yes, hi there, Polly.
Barbara.
Well,
I get the same thing being in Salt Lake City. Are there Jewish people that live in Salt Lake City? Yep, we do have a Jewish community here.
Yeah.
I think we're probably going to wrap up in a few minutes, but I know there were some Michigan parents there who wanted to connect. So let me just make sure that Fred and Raina get a chance to say.
Hello, Fred. Fred,
Hey, Raina.
how are you?
Fine. How are you?
I still have all my teeth.
Terrific. That's
Thanks to you.
So Raina's my mom, and I didn't realize until I reconnected with Maida 25 years later that her dad, Fred, was my parents' dentist. Small young Judea world.
And I think I just asked your mom. My mom was in a French club with her, I swear.
It still exists today. We're
Oh my
50
God.
years old. Yes.
She's in one in Connecticut now. So
Is she on the call here?
no.
Oh, okay.
may I chime in for a moment? I don't know if they can hear me.
Please.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Being a retired Army, I really enjoyed this presentation immensely, and hearing everything that they had to say about their service. And it was just wonderful to hear. And again, when I was the only Jewish individual in all the units that I ever served in. And I really never had any problems. And I think if you do what you're supposed to do, and I think I think as long as you follow your orders, do what you're supposed to do, you really don't have any issues. At least I never had. I guess I was very fortunate. But yeah, it was. I enjoyed my time in the military, and I still communicate with a lot of friends that are here and all over the country. So it's being in the service, it's like being in a fraternity. You always connect with the people that you served with. So it's been a great experience. So thank you guys. Thank you all for all the what you said today. I really enjoyed it, and I wouldn't have missed it. So thank you again.
I hear Shelley saying go Army.
We are so proud of all of you.
John was, like he said, in Iraq. I much preferred to be flying over John if he was, than down there. God bless the Army, but not ready to go in the mud.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Well, I think that is a wonderful way for us to wrap up the afternoon with a lot of thanks and gratitude to everybody. So I'm going to have Kevin close out in we'll give 60 seconds for goodbyes and then close out the room. Thank you, everybody. Have a great day.